Rov. We do. Just the Rov that we're discussing here is a very bad Rov. The Rov of Radia is a very bad Rov. Why? Good. So he doesn't say. He says, Ruba l'Radia zavni loy choshev. So I think that the Pshat and Tosis is like this. That every Rov, there's two types of Rovs in general. There's something called the Rov D'Isa Kaman, which is you have 9 pieces of meat, 10 pieces of meat, 9 are kosher, 1 is treif, etc. So you're counting up the things in front of you. Then there's a type of Rov, which is Rov called Lesa Kaman. It's more a general thing that this happens in the world. But most of the Rovs that are called Lesa Kaman, there's a Lashon in Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva's Lashon in Ksuvas, Daf Yud Gimel, if I remember correctly. Rabbi Kiva's Lashon is, the Rov Lesa Kaman is a Rov Sheteva Ha'olam Mechayiv Loy Markein. The world was created with that type of natural mitzias. So for example, Rov Bi'ulis Achar Abal. We assume that most children are born from the father who's married to the woman. That's a natural thing. Hashem created the world with that mitzias, that Rov Bi'ulis, right? Or you have Rov Behemus Einam Treifus. You didn't count up the amount of animals in the world and say Hashem made the world that way, that Rov Behemus Einam Treifus. Or things of that nature, when it's Ruba de Lesa Kaman, is because there's a reason that it has to be that way. Okay? Rov Noshim, that give birth to a Ben Kayama. The world was created with that teva. This Rov over here, of Rov people by l'Radia, is completely circumstantial. There's nothing.
Meaning it could change?
Yeah. If society, if economically speaking, it would be better that most people should invest into meat than Radia, then they'll buy Rov will be after the meat. There's nothing specific about this Rov other than that we happen to know that right now, based on the economic mitzias, the latest Wall Street Journal article says that Rov people buy l'Radia. Okay? But tomorrow, things could change. So I think that that's what Tosis means. I mean, I didn't see this pshat anywhere. But I think what Tosis means is that it's not considered a Rov in Teva. And if Rabbi Kiva says that most times a Rov de Lesa Kaman is a Rov Sheteva Ha'olam Mechayiv Loy Markein. So Rov that most people when they're buying a cow, buy for Rajah, not Basar, is completely circumstantial. It's not, there's nothing Mechayiv that Rov to be true. Okay? So therefore, that's Tosis' answer. So according to Tosis, you can only apply the whole concept to these lower level Rovs, which would be these cases of Mekach Tois. You're buying something, and you could be buying it for A or B. We have another case in the Siman we're going to get to, is you buy seeds. You buy wheat. Why? You could buy wheat for one or two reasons. You could buy wheat to grind it up, make flour, and make bread, or to plant it. Now you need a higher grade seed to plant it to create wheat. Okay, a lower grade seed will be enough to make flour. So the guy tried to plant it and it flopped, and he's like, "Hey, you sold me a bad piece of bad seeds." No, I didn't. I thought you were making challah for Shabbos. I didn't. You're a farmer, or what? Right? So it's the same shayla. No, most people buy flour for that. Again, that's circumstantial. So therefore, it's only going to be in these cases. But that's Tosis' answer. Tosis in Baba Kama gives a different answer. Tosis Baba Kama asks the same kasha. And Tosis says, "V'yesh loymar, tehasam gabe dayanim shayni dechoshem miyat dituki misha einay." When you have a bezdin and 2 against 1, how many people are paskening the shayla? 2 or 3? 3, because the bezdin is made up of 3. But 1 second, but only 2 of them pasken that way. So how'd you get a psak from a bezdin? You can't have a bezdin of 2. So the Achar Rabbim tells me 2 things. This is Reb Chaim says. Pshat in this Tosis. Reb Chaim says Pshat in this Tosis is that the Bezdin Rov is a totally different Rov. Bezdin Rov is a 2-step Rov. Number 1 is we go by the Rov, we follow the Rov. But once we follow the Rov determines that the meat is batal, and the male of the whole Bezdin is paskening like the Rov.
So it's not the Rov that's being moitzed, it's the Bezdin that's being moitzed.
Right, and the Rov just determined that that's the psak of the entire Bezdin. So it says Tosis, that's why you're allowed to go by Rov there. But regular Rov, ain't al chamam nachar Rov, because Ruba v'chazaka, Ruba adif. What's better, Rov v'chazaka Rov? Chazaka? What? No, Ruba Chazaka, Ruba Adif. Just forget, that's a kasha on that. Forget. But fine, that's a kasha. That's Shimon. Everyone has that kasha. I'm sorry.
You can't get Kmandalas when it's not.
That's it. The point is that the roiv of Bezdin is a different type of roiv. It's bottle, and that's why you use it for mom. You use it for mom. But regularly, you don't go basa mom, and you go with the muchzak. Now, why don't you say Ruba Adif? It's a different question. We'll leave that for a different time. Okay, so that's this concept that the point that Taos is saying is that every time you want to take money from someone, okay, someone has possession of the money, and you want to remove the money from his possession, the concept is amoitzi mechaveroi alav araya. That when you want to take money from someone, you need a proof. Alav araya. And you need a proof. So migu is not a proof. So a roiv is not a strong enough proof to be moitzi mammon. Okay, so you go with the muchzak. So therefore, going back to this siman, the Mekach bought something and he gave the money. Now he's saying it's a Mekach Taos. So he said, why is it Mekach Taos? Because roiv people that buy, most people, the majority of people who buy ox, buy it for the purpose of plowing, and you sold me an ox which is not capable of plowing. Okay? But you have to prove to me that that's why you bought it, and a roiv is not a good enough proof. Okay. But our question was, what about the other case? What about a case where he didn't pay yet, and he's the muchzak? So let's go back now to Sif Chaf Aleph, which is in the first page in the papers, and it says like this: Machar lo Yisroim. The case I told you before. A guy sold seeds, which are edible, and he planted them and they didn't sprout. I feel hayazera pishtan shiroi bnei adam koinen oisel izriya hoyel va'oichlem oisai einoi chayev ba'achrayes zri asai. Einoi chayev ba'achrayes zri asai. You don't have to pay. So it said here, roi bnei adam, buy it for zira. Then the Rama adds, miu im loy nasan adayin mamais. If the Mekach did not pay yet, yesh oimim diachol Mekach loymer lezriya kanisi. Yesh oimim diachol Mekach loymer lezriya kanisi. The Mekach could say, I bought it for the purpose of zriya, not achila. It says I bought it for the purpose of zriya, to plant the seeds. The seeds that you gave me are not plantable grade seeds, and I don't want to pay you. I don't want to pay you. Fine. So he doesn't have to pay. So is the Ramah talking even if the roiv is in the favor of the seller? Let's say roiv people buy seeds for eating. And now you're claiming that you don't want to pay because you planted them and they're not right for planting. But you didn't buy them for planting. So, if you look at the Gra here, the Gra says, it sounds like from him that once you have the money, then the roiv is never going to be good enough. The roiv is not going to be good enough. So that's what the Rambam would be saying. But we were Medaik in the Mechaber before, not like that. We were Medaik in the Mechaber before, right, that it's only if there's no roiv in the favor of the Moicher. So the Nesivus asks this kasha, and he brings down a very geshmak svara. Let's speak out the svara to be mechalik, but then in the end he passes. It's not like that svara, but it's just a geshmak svara to speak out. So what's the case? The Mekach says that the buyer took the animal, and now he realizes it's not capable of plowing. He goes back to the seller. He says, "Man, you sold me an ox which I can't use for my purpose, which is to plow." He says, "Well, I thought you were buying it to shecht, and it's perfectly fine to shecht. So I don't want to give you back your money." So he says, "Well, that's not why I bought it, and I don't want to pay you." Well, most people who buy ox are buying it to eat. And therefore, based on the roiv, you owe me the money. The mashmois and the mechaber would be that the buyer has to pay, even though there's only a roiv in his favor. There's a roiv in the favor of the mecher. Why? He's the mochzak. He's holding the money. So the Prisha says, because once you take an animal, you become mechuyev to pay. So your muchzakos on the money is very weak. The muchzakos of the seller after the sale is done on the money is very strong. The sale is done. The transfer of funds took place. The seller has the money. He has a very strong chazak on the money. The lokech to get it back needs a real proof, and therefore a roiv is not going to be a good enough proof to be moitzi the moment from the moicher. But the lokech owes the money. His chazaka, the fact that he has the money, is not such a good chazaka, because he just didn't pay it, but he really owes him. So says the Prisha, if as long as the roiv is in the favor of the moicher, the lokech would have to pay. What? I don't want to return the ox. The seller doesn't want. It's not considered a mum. It's not considered a mum as far as the moicher is concerned. No, so you made a kinyan. You made a kinyan, and if you made a kinyan, you have no proof that the kinyan was not valid. That's the whole point. It's not. You have to. That's your opinion because you're using roiv. But the moicher, you're using a miyat. But the roiv says not like that. The roiv says that the sale was done for achila. So there's the Prisha Svara. The Nesivis, you probably have it on the page.
I owe you money, so take back Shavah Kesef. Take back the cash.
It's not worth the same anymore. It went up and down on price.
Anyway, you can't do that because look at the last Ramah. The Ramah says, "Kol makom daven Mekach tois v'tzach lachzer loydamov v'isla izuzi tzach litan leimois davik kabal choiv." You know, in Choshen Mishpat, there's different ways how to accept payment, right? Nezikin is b'meitav, right? There's different halachas. So a bal choiv, when you owe someone money, you can't say, "Hey, I have an old antique, grandfather clock from my great grandfather, and it's worth the amount that I owe you. Can you take it?" No, I want cash. The lender can demand cash. But what if you damage someone? Can the lender demand cash? Meitav, whatever, different. What happens if you owe someone for work that they did? Every category has a different halacha about this. So what about if you want to give back money that's owed from a Mekach tois? That's like a bal choiv, you have to give cash. You can't just say, "Hey, take the cash value," and something else. In points, you know? So the Nesivis, in the end of Yud Beis, basically says no such svara. And the bottom line is that whoever is holding the money gets to keep the money until the person who wants to take it away from him brings a proof which is better than roiv. Roiv is not good enough, and roiv will not even be mitzvah from the lokech either. And he says the words in the mechaber el afilu ki adodi is lav dafka. That means that even if roiv is in the favor of the moicher, if the lokech did not pay yet, roiv animal. Let's get this again. He bought a cow, he didn't pay. He wants to say that he bought the animal for charisha, for plowing, and therefore it's a mekach tois. Because I can't use the animal for plowing. The buyer says most people that come into my store are buying it for the purpose of achila, to eat it. And therefore I sold you an animal which is worthy of that. If the buyer didn't pay and he insists that he did not buy it for that reason, he bought it for charisha and he wants his money back, then Nesivus paskins in the favor of the lokeach, and since he's the muchzak, he can hold on to the money. He don't have to pay. It's an interesting machlokes.
Hold on to the what?
The money.
He didn't pay it.
He didn't pay. He would have to give back the animal,
Right.
obviously.
But if he paid it, he couldn't.
If he paid, then the opposite. Now everything's in the favor of the seller. Because once he gave over the money, once the transfer of funds took place, then it's all over.
If the buyer disclosed
ahead of time that that's what he needs it for. He needs it for plowing.
Clear.
He's bought,
That's good.
Even if the road is against him.
Yes. That's the end of the mechaber. And not even if you disclose it. If the last 10 times that you came to the store, you disclosed, I need another animal for my flock, for my plowing flock. Okay, sure. Come in. Last 10 times. This time he was silent. He didn't say anything. But they have a relationship, and the seller knows who the buyer is. The seller can't come now and say, well, you didn't say anything, so I went with the roiv. Can't do that. If he knows that the understanding on the part of the buyer is for a certain thing, then he has to go with that. So, okay? So these are all different ways to prove the point. Okay? So that would be the halacha in those cases. And look, there's a lot of pratim here, but that you're right, Shmuel. That if as long as he spoke it out, it's good. Now there is a question here: if both sides have to know about this. In other words, the whole concept of the whole concept over here. What if they're on a different page? The seller, in his mind, sold it for achila, and the buyer, in his mind, bought it for charisha. So, who do you go by? At that point, you go by the muhzak, right? It doesn't.
Yeah, but if I argue and I say I told you, and you say no, you never told me, then.
No, then you go back to the Safek case again. You go with the muhzak, But in general, if they're not on the same page, then you go with the muhzak.
The case in Mechaber Ramah, they're not on the same page. He says, I thought you bought it for this, and I said, I thought you were buying it for that.
Right, exactly. Now, if we just go, that's obviously this is a Velt sugya. Giving it a half hour is not really doing justice, but just a few tidbits on this point. Now, there is a sif before in Chaf that we'll just read. When it says it, because there's one point there that's interesting. It says, you sold me a certain type of seed, which is not an edible seed. It's not like wheat or barley. You sold me a tomato seed. The purpose of a tomato seed is clearly to plant, and didn't work. The seller has to give back the money. Now, this is another case, like we had before, that the seller has to give back the money even though the buyer is not returning the item because the seeds are gone. Okay? And why? Why can't he say, I thought you were buying it to eat it? Because that's much more than roiv. That's the derech ha'olam in general. Nobody buys it for eating. But what happens if he says, one thing, I sold the same seeds to 10 other people, and they worked for everybody else. They didn't work for you. So it must be that the reason they didn't work is because your land doesn't have enough nutrients. The soil's not good. Not because my seeds are not good. So what would be the claim over there? What would happen in that case? You hear that point?
You have to show that other things grew in this land.
Who?
The buyer.
Oh, he's saying v'imlach za'aret b'barak and shema machlas habared lo tzamchu. Shema. So it sounds like from the Mechaber that as long as there's a possibility that the seller can blame the soil of the buyer, he would not have to give back the money. Okay. So again, we would go back to the point. We would go back to the same concept. We would go back to the same concept of, if he didn't pay yet, maybe you wouldn't have to pay because he could say, "Look, it wasn't my soil; it was your seeds." Now, here's a big question in the Paiskim. The Shach deals with the question in that case when you do the Mekach Taos, when you have the Mekach Taos claim, do you also get reimbursed for the money that you spent on the planting? In other words, you sold me, you hear the question? You sold me bad seeds. Okay, the seeds cost $3 for a pallet. Okay? Now I spent thousands of dollars on my employees, planting this and that. Now I go in, the whole thing, and Mekach Taos, you sold me bad seeds. I go back to the Garden Depot, and I say, the seeds are no good. They're like, oh yeah, I made a mistake, sorry. Here's your $3 back. It says in Shulchan Aruch. I follow Shulchan Aruch. It says that I sold you bad seeds, you get back your money. Okay, but do you get reimbursed for all the money that you spent on the planting, which is the main expense? So the Shach brings down that no, it's not the Shach, it's the Sma, I'm sorry. In Sma and Memvav he says, Mishum hachi nami tzarach lachzil kol dama afshu kvar kola v'nirkav ve'ina mochi yochel loy ma lokach hachzil ve'anima aval ma shetarach v'haitzi b'zyosan ein tzarach ha-mochi litin la'alokach. You don't have to pay, okay? But that's all. You do not have to pay for the expenses that came out from using the bad seeds. You see the Shach, the Sma Memvav? Yeah. So the Shaila is that only a case where, it's mashma a little bit in the Sma, it's only in a case where the seller didn't know either. What if the seller did know? And he was hoping that the guy would just forget about it. So it's possible in that case, the halacha is different. If the seller knew, then isn't it meduik a little bit in the Sma that if the seller knew, then maybe he does have to pay?
How would he be chayav? Why would it be chayav for more than?
I don't know yet. What?
It was a grama mazik. It's not. He didn't cause the hazard b'yadayim.
But he knew what was going to happen.
Great. So he's no worse than the guy who blocks your driveway and doesn't let you park in it.
No. It's a little more direct because the seeds are being used for this purpose, and if he knew, then that's one of the tanoim of gramas. You have to know what you're doing. I'm not sure. I'm not saying this for sure. I'm saying I think that there's a little bit of a diuk like that. That you would have to think about that. That the Sma is all talking when he doesn't know about it. But this is very negea, right? You buy a piece of property, then you put in money, and then you go to get it zoned, and then they sold you property that's not able to be zoned for this. Now, we had discussed that this was the purpose of the whole thing, right? So unless you have a good lawyer drafting you a contract, even if you could somehow get some money back, they may not be able to pay you, right? You may not be able to get all the money back for all the damages, right? So this is like an interesting type of shaila that would come up in these cases. Okay, so next week we're going to talk about the shipping costs that are involved. Okay, what happens if I want to ship it back or I shipped it? These are also similar expenses that could come up from Mekach Taos. We'll talk about that in Mitzvah Shem next week. Shkoyach. No, we have no more room. No more. No more reservations. So I'm not saying.
I got in.
So you want to turn it off?
There was a singer texted me last night like
at 2 in the morning.
Like at 3, 4 in the morning. Yeah.
You were still up.
I was still up. Yeah. Texted me back.